So imagine this. You dedicate your entire life to building something incredible, something truly monumental. Bridging cultures, creating a written language from scratch, building entire communities, only to watch it all just turn to dust. That, right there, is the story of John Eliot and the incredible work that history nearly forgot.
But first, let me just ask you a question. Who do you think printed the very first complete Bible on the American continent? I'm going to guess the answer is probably not who you think. And that answer, well, it unlocks this whole story of a man whose greatest achievement was, ironically, the one he might have cared about the least.
Okay, so let's meet the guy at the center of this really incredible piece of history.
Right, so John Eliot. He was an English Puritan who came over to Massachusetts back in the 1630s. He was a minister, yeah, but he would end up earning this title that really defined his legacy, the Apostle to the Indians. And that title, it hinted at this singular, all-consuming mission that would pretty much shape the entire rest of his life.
But here's the thing, this mission didn't just happen overnight. Not at all. In fact, when you look at his early life, you see this really long delay before his true calling even began.
Let's just quickly trace his path. He was born in England, educated at Cambridge, and he lands in Boston in 1631. But here's the really surprising part. It wasn't until 1646, a full 15 years later, that the work he's so famous for actually started. So what was he doing for a decade and a half?
Well, for those first 15 years, he was a dedicated pastor to his English congregation in Roxbury. But then, something changed. He felt this really profound calling to a completely new mission, one that would take up the next 35 years of his life, working with the local Massachusetts tribe.
And this mission, it had these two huge, incredibly ambitious goals that he was chasing at the exact same time. One, creating a whole network of self-governing Christian native communities, and two, translating the entire Bible into their language. No big deal, right?
These praying towns were a totally radical idea. I mean, they weren't just missions. Eliot saw them as almost entirely self-governing communities. The whole idea was for converts to adopt not only Christianity, but also a Puritan kind of civil structure, where the town's government was based on this shared agreement, this covenant with God.
And you know what? His idea totally worked. I mean, it worked on a scale that was just remarkable for the time. At the peak of his mission, around 1674, there were 14 of these unique towns, and they were home to an estimated 3,600 people, with about 1,100 of them considered full converts. This wasn't some small project. It was a thriving, growing network.
But at the exact same time he was building all these towns, Eliot was undertaking this other absolutely monumental task. First, he had to master the incredibly complex Algonquian language. Then, he had to get funding from England for a printing press. By 1661, he had the New Testament printed, and just 2 years after that, he finished the whole thing, the entire Bible.
And that brings us right back to our opening question. This Bible, printed in the Massachusetts language, was the very first complete Bible printed in America. A truly staggering historic achievement.
But here's what's so fascinating. For all the historical weight we put on this book, for Eliot himself, it was never the end goal, not even close. It was just a tool, an aid, as he put it, to help him with what he saw as his true mission, building those communities.
So, Eliot's work flourished for decades. It was a success by every single measure of the time. And then, in a single year, it was all wiped away.
The turning point was 1675. That's when this brutal conflict known as King Philip's War broke out. This war, between the English colonists and a coalition of Native American tribes, would completely and tragically upend the world that Eliot had spent his life building.
And this is really the heart of the tragedy. Before 1675, you have 30 years of painstaking work, resulting in 14 thriving communities. After 1675, they were just gone, wiped out. Not just by the war itself, but by this massive wave of fear and vengeance that just swept over everything.
The real tragedy here was that the praying Indians were just caught in the middle. They were trapped. Warring tribes saw them as traitors, while the panicked, vengeful colonists didn't really distinguish between friendly and hostile natives. So they were attacked from all sides. Eliot tried, he really did, to rebuild after the war was over, but it was hopeless. His life's work was gone. Forever.
Eliot lived for another 15 years after the war, and he died in 1690. And despite witnessing the absolute, complete destruction of everything he had built, His faith apparently remained unshaken. His last recorded words were, "Welcome joy."
So it just leaves us with this final, massive question. Here's a man who created the first American Bible, a network of unique communities, only to see it all vanish in a storm of violence. So what really remains of a legacy when its physical presence is so completely and utterly erased?